Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberker. At least 235,000 people have fled Idlib since mid-December amid airstrikes by Russian-backed forces targeting Syria's last major rebel stronghold. The United Nations says the mass displacement has left southern Idlib almost empty. Despite an August ceasefire deal and calls for de-escalation, Russian and Syrian regime forces have pressed on with an assault in northwest Syria. Dozens of towns and villages have been seized and hundreds of people killed. The Syrian regime has vowed to recapture Idlib, but has denied claims of indiscriminate bombing on civilians. The latest escalation of violence has forced a new wave of refugee influx towards Turkey's border. But Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has said his country cannot handle a further inflow of refugees and has warned that Europe will also feel the impact if the bombing is not stopped. And joining me now is Murat Aslan, who is an assistant professor of political science and international relations at Hasan Kalyoncu University, and Navvar Saban, who is a military analyst at OMRAN Center for Strategic Studies. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you here. So at least 235,000 people have been displaced from southern Idlib since mid-December, and 140,000 of them are children. And this newly displaced adds to the already 400,000 people displaced earlier. Navvar, what is happening in Idlib and why now?
Thank you for having me. First of all, it was obvious after the final round of Sochi that the Russians intend to conduct some kind of operation that bring for them a victory before the end of the year. They did not care about the civilian location. They did not care about the crisis that might happen. They wanted, basically, they announced that they want to accomplish the first agreement, which was the point of the first agreement in September 2018. They want to secure the international road. They want to evacuate the area from any kind of armory, and they want to get rid of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. But here is the interesting thing. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is part of the force that controlled the area. They did not receive any kind of massive hit. They did not announce any kind of big losses among them. Even some of the opposition faction, they did not receive any kind of big destruction on their warehouses or headquarters. The only victim here from this massive campaign were the civilians. Yes. Either IDPs or death among civilians, and the situation is becoming even worse. Now the regime did not enter Ma'arat Noman, but they took an area. Jarjanas is a very high area. Basically, with a small weapon, they can target the Ma'arat Noman area. So that's why Ma'arat Noman, most of the people fled from Ma'arat Noman.
Now it's a ghost town, I believe, right?
It's almost a ghost town. Only the western part of it, some people are living in it because they basically don't have a B plan or an option, or they don't want to leave their home in the winter to be living under the tent.
Yes. So winter conditions are also exacerbating in the dire humanitarian situation. Murat, tell us about the significance of this Marat al-Numan and Saragep villages, which the regime has taken control of.
The town is located at the south of Idlib, as you know. And I think the most prominent issue for these two towns are their attitude towards the displaced persons when Assad regime attacked Aleppo, East Ghouta, because they hosted the displaced Syrians at their homes, refusing to build up a tent city. So after a while, we see that Assad regime now press these two towns and evacuate them from the region. And it's a kind of psychological, pressure upon the civilian minds, because Assad regime's intention is a bit favoring the military outcomes rather than civilian concerns currently.
So it also sits on a highway connecting Aleppo and the capital Damascus, so it's economically important for Assad regime. But tell me, since these towns are evacuated, who will come and live there?
And that's the issue. That's the issue. Assad regime is trying to establish a kind of zone for nobody. The strategy...
It's going to be an uninhabited place?
Because now take, for instance, Eastern Ghouta. the population over there had been evacuated and pushed up north, as you know.
Yes.
And now who is placed over there? So it's a kind of ethnic cleansing, forcing people to immigrate from the areas that are being inhabited and trying to build up a country with or upon a certain sect who are loyal to Assad regime. That's the essence of the policy of Assad regime.
So, Navvar, do you think this offensive will continue unabated? And what happens when they reach further north?
Basically, the Russian put a lot of effort in the ground. They do have some kind of manpower problem after like reallocating some of their forces in the eastern Euphrates, and also they lost a lot of casualties among their troops, the regime troops in northern Latakia attempts a few months ago. So basically now they control a very strategic location. They can like oversee the M4 international road, so they don't have exactly to go through M4 and control it right now, because they basically control it with the firearms. So they can put more pressure on the civilian, which will put more pressure on the Turkish side to find some kind of solution for the whole area. Basically, the Russian final goal is to secure the southern part under Ariha, which is Marat Noman. They need to connect Marat Noman with Aleppo city or El Hader, southern Aleppo. So their main target, if we're going to talk about their main goal, it's going to be Marat Noman, it's going to be Saraqib, the international road. Basically, if we want to talk common sense, if they wanted to implement a new road from Al Hader to Hama, it will cost them very less than what they are doing right now. But it's more like a victory for them. They need this victory.
Okay, they need that victory, but I mean, Turkey and Russia are allies recently, and while securing those places in southern Idlib, Russia, backing the Assad regime, is actually risking Turkey's security.
Absolutely. Astana process, which is based on observing the de-escalation zones, is a kind of principle for identifying the policies in the region. But current situation directly threatens the security of Turkey, not only in terms of hard security concerns like having terror networks at the up north of Syria, but also soft threats like immigration, because Turkey cannot tolerate further immigration anymore. And the burden of this immigration is not only upon Turkey, but also the civilians themselves.
So Turkey says the military observation posts will remain there no matter what until a resolution is found. How sustainable it is?
I think this statement presents a kind of determination to the original text of Astana process, because the agreement indicated that these observation posts were to report what's going on in the region, and they are reporting right now, and they are not to combat with anybody, as you know. So if these observation posts has to leave the region, then there's no Astana process.
Yeah. So, Navvar, I think you're of the view that the latest attacks are targeting civilians and some rebel groups, but at the same time ignoring Al-Qaeda-linked extremists. Could you elaborate on that? Why?
Yeah, it's not only Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. People, when they talk about extremists in Idlib and this area, they mention Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is like the most famous group, and also they have the Salvation Government, which is the administration part of the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. But still, in Idlib, we have several other factions like Huras al-Din, like Ansar al-Tawheed, like Taliban, Imam Ali bin Abi Talib. There is a lot of groups, subgroups in the area that is causing a lot of damage in regard of the security situation. So basically targeting these factions.
How do they differentiate them?
They differentiate them. Who? The Russian? They don't target them. So so basically they know exactly where they are located. For example, Huras al-Din is located in northern Latakia. During the operation in northern Latakia from the regime, Huras al-Din did not receive any kind of hit. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is located in some part of southern Aleppo.
So you say the Russians know their whereabouts and they're not targeting them on purpose?
It's serving them because just their presence is causing the security situation to be more fragile. These factions are, they issued several statements that they have a problem with the other Jabhat Tahrir al-Wataniya, which is like the ex-FSA faction. So basically, their presence is serving the Russian in indirect way. So destroying them will like prevent the Russian from causing the situation inside Idlib from inside out to be a disaster. So they basically now the Russian are doing two kind of attack from outside, and depending on these extremists to conduct some kind of attack from inside.
Okay. At the same time, Turkey says it can, we just mentioned it, but it can't take any more refugees in. And Turkey seeks international assistance in this respect. But at the same time, Turkey also waits for Russia and the United States to fulfill its commitments in northern Syria. What is your take on that?
It's a clear picture of contradiction, especially for European Union. Let me tell you how. First, European Union pledged 3 billion euros, and later then will pledge another 3 billion. Okay, but they pledge it for the immigrants who are being harbored in Turkey.
Yes.
But what about
and it's
the
not
ones?
Enough.
Yeah, and what about the ones in Syria? If there is a project going to the circles of the European Union for the Syrians living in Syria as displaced people or individuals, that they reject it. So immigration is a kind of encouragement for the Syrian civilians by reaching Turkish borders, and by that way, it's a problem on Turkey. So Turkey does not want to accept more immigrants, but if EU wants to provide assistance, they can also assist them in Syria too.
So I'm afraid we're out of time. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk. The former Soviet Republic of Georgia has become a close ally of Turkey since gaining independence in the early 1990s. Ankara has become its biggest trading partner outside the European Union, and border controls have been relaxed. But the neighbors are still struggling with one issue, and it is related to the failed coup in Turkey in 2016. TRT World's diplomatic correspondent Andrew Hopkins reports from Georgia.
On the outskirts of the Georgian capital is the International Black Sea University. Established in the 1990s, its graduates have filled some of the country's top positions. But Turkey wants the institution and several others closed down, saying it has links to FETÖ, the Fethullah terrorist organisation, blamed for the failed coup in 2016. Hayati Kutchuk was involved in setting up the university and worked with the network in Georgia at the time.
To make sure an ideology can be brought to life and continue, you need to educate students and make sure they graduate. Then what happens? Gulen has this aim for sure. He wants his people in higher positions in governments, as they were in Turkey, judges, prosecutors, policemen, and so on. It's the same method all around the world.
Turkey has identified the International Black Sea University and 7 schools in Georgia that it wants shut down. Officials have already closed 3 over management concerns. 3 have also been ordered to pay more than $500,000 after tax audits. The International Black Sea University was also banned from enrolling new students for several months over an unpaid tax penalty, but enrolments have since resumed. These buildings behind me used to be the private Demirel College. It was the first school opened by the Gulenist organisation in Georgia in 1993, but it was closed in 2017 when its licence was revoked. Turkey says that schools like these are important for setting up networks. Gifted and poor or rich students would have been targeted to become active in the group. Officials believe Muslims and ethnic Turks would have been the focus, and they make up 10% of Georgia's population.
In 1992, when they started opening schools, when they started this twinning cities, they had this twinnings. A couple of cities in Turkey, their organizations would collect money, they will send the money here to support the schools. Then, but in time, they have established companies here, or they have brought their members to do business here. And they helped an ecosystem to be formed. their businesses would feed the schools. The children's parents who are in those schools who were given a scholarship would be working in different state authorities of Georgia who would help the parents. So they have actually fed a culture of nepotism and corruption in the beginning particularly.
Turkish officials have already identified companies in Georgia that are helping to grow the network. They believe Gulenists account for about $50 million worth of business. Among them are these cafes, Ziyade and Supra, widely known locally as Gulenist enterprises. And about an hour's drive from Tbilisi is a small city of Marneuli. A Turkish presence isn't hard to spot here either. Businesses supportive of Gulen have been identified. This man got into an argument in a cafe with someone praising FETÖ after the failed coup. Fearing for his safety, he's asked to remain anonymous.
FETÖ is so active around this area, especially after the coup attempt. They came in huge numbers. Nearly all the Turkish restaurants are owned by them, and all other shops, garages employ them. They've had a school here also. They've closed it, but only for show. It's still operating.
TRT World understands Turkey has asked for the extradition of at least 17 people from Georgia. All are suspected of playing a major role in the Gulen network there. One is known to be Adem Ernal, the most senior Gulenist official, or imam, in the country. His current whereabouts are unknown. Another is İlyas Çilolu, the rector of the International Black Sea University. He's still very much a public figure in Georgia and can be seen in this promotional video for the university's 2019 welcome party. The third person of interest is Mustafa Emre Çabuk, a former teacher. He's believed to have fled the country after being released on bail during the legal proceedings for his extradition hearing. He was found to be using a messaging application popular with Gulenists and much more.
We know that he was given access to the cryptic communication system by lock. He was referenced there by the so-called imam of FETÖ in Georgia, so that's how we know he's very closely related. And in his close network of bylock people, there are police officers in Turkey. I mean, like, if he's just a school teacher or a principal, if I were the prosecutor, I would ask, so what does this police officer doing in your close circle of a clandestine cryptographic communication system? So these are the questions I think which should be asked in a court. To do that, we need to have his extradition. And he was the person who was responsible of, by the way, transferring the company that owns the schools here to another one. So basically, he was trying to launder the ownership. But again, Çabuk is one of the FETÖ, if I may say so, ringleaders.
But here in the Georgian capital, Turkey faces problems convincing politicians and judges. It's no surprise to find this in the centre of Tbilisi, an information centre on NATO and the EU, which aims to increase public support for both organisations. Georgia isn't a member of either yet, but links are growing stronger all the time. Back in 2008, NATO agreed Georgia could eventually become a member, and the country signed an association agreement with the EU in 2014, something which Turkish officials believe is exploited by Gulenists, who put pressure on the Georgian government through human rights groups and NGOs, resulting in statements like this from the European Parliament in 2018, which says it is
deeply concerned by the pressure being exerted by Turkey on Turkish residents in Georgia, as well as on educational institutions due to their alleged affiliation to the Gulen movement, urges the Georgian authorities to follow the case closely, ensuring that judicial procedures and any action taken are fully in line with European principles and standards. urges the EU to support and help the Eastern Partnership countries to withstand the pressure exerted over the last few months, in particular by Turkey.
Turkey and Georgia have been collaborating completely within the legal and internationally accepted norms and standards against these people. The investigations, the information exchange, and all this have been done according to the international norms, standards, law, and everything. So that report is not only a manipulation of information and the facts, but also it's I think, an open pressure to government of Georgia. And that report, I think, is about Georgia's relations with the EU. So, if I may ask, how come Turkish-Georgian relations in mutual legal assistance or security matters becomes a part of an EU report on Georgia?
At the International Black Sea University, they're also keen to foster international links, especially with foreign diplomats. This video shows the US Deputy Chief of Mission Elizabeth Rood. She's not accused of any wrongdoing, but has attended several events at the institution.
I'm very pleased to participate in International Black Sea University's 11th American Studies Conference.
Hayati Küçük says he broke off relations with the organisation in the early 2000s when a delegation from the US arrived to inspect the schools.
Gürcistan'ın ilk imamı Mesut Bozkır'ın
The head of the network in Georgia at that time asked us to prepare activity reports for foreign countries' embassies, such as the US and Israel. I objected to this and questioned it. I asked why we should give reports to other countries. We have an embassy here that we are accountable to. Our main aim should be serving our country and giving reports to them, not to others.
The Gulenist presence in Georgia dates back to the early 1990s. The Soviet Union had collapsed and Georgia had declared independence, but it was dogged by instability, civil war and political unrest, and desperately in need of new infrastructure, such as schools. Turkey was also keen to improve relations with its neighbour. In 1995, Prime Minister Tansu Çiller arrived to discuss a new oil pipeline with President Eduard Shevardnadze. The same year, the two attended the opening of a new border crossing and the International Black Sea University. Many people were impressed at that time by the network's intentions.
o günkü şartlarda
At that time, our aim was to represent our country abroad. This could be in different ways, and we chose education. At that time, we thought opening these kinds of schools would be beneficial for our country's aims and bilateral relations with Georgia. We conducted our trade and business with the same aim.
Recently, the border between the two countries has become an issue. Turks don't need a passport to enter Georgia, only an ID card, making cross-border travel easier. However, Turkey believes FETÖ members are exploiting the situation.
They try to seek asylum here and stay in the meanwhile, work. Because it's very close to Turkey, they smuggle money or means, and they're close to their family. The family can travel, and they use this as a waiting room. They abuse this rule, and they stay here. And then, according to our information, some of them cross to, say, other countries and come back. And extend their stay here. Their aim is to stay here in Georgia, take residence permit, and then take citizenship so that they won't be extradited to Turkey back. Or they try to go to Europe from here.
For now, Turkish officials are still trying to push Georgian authorities to take more action against FETÖ, arguing that terrorism is not only about violence and can involve fundraising, fraud and indoctrination. TRT World approached the Georgian government several times to respond to issues contained in this report, but they didn't give an answer. We also approached the Georgian ombudsman, whose job it is to oversee human rights in the country, and they declined. Turkish officials believe many people educated at Gulen schools in Georgia won't have been drawn into the network and have no involvement in its activities and its attempts to portray itself as a religious organisation. But then again, they also won't be aware of how it operates. Andrew Hopkins for Straight Talk in Tbilisi, Georgia.
And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Ayşe Süberker. If you've got any comments, do share them with us on Twitter with the hashtag Straight Talk. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.